Why would a major league team give a player without a day of service time in the majors a $95 million contract? We'll break it down. Let's go. Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Tuesday, March 31st. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris, Britt here with you on this episode. We have two somewhat surprising extensions that have happened over the last 24 hours or so. The Mariners and Brewers getting in on the fun, giving 8-year deals to a pair of players that we have not seen in the big leagues yet, Colt Emerson and Cooper Pratt. We're going to break that down. We put some players under the microscope on the Tuesday slate, including Roki Sasaki, who made his season debut after a bumpy spring. We'll talk about what we saw in that first outing against the Guardians and where we think things are going from here. And later on in the episode, we have our Giants season preview with Andrew Baggarly. Britt, how's it going for you on this Tuesday?
It's going well. When you said giant, I thought you just meant like huge. And then I was like, oh, Andrew Baggarly. Okay, it's the Giants season preview. The Giants, of course, finally get a win, right? Did you guys see Tony Vitello barefoot celebrating?
Enjoying himself.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a 26-minute preview. I don't know if it made it into the giant level of season preview. But if we could do 90-minute season previews on every single team next year, I would love to do that. I don't know if that's actually possible.
Yeah, you really get into the weeds.
That. Nobody wants that. That's right. How's it going for you on this Tuesday, you know?
I'm doing great. Ready to go.
Let's start with some baseball news you should know. Colt Emerson approaching an 8-year, $95 million deal with the Mariners. And of course, Colt Emerson has not made his big league debut yet. This contract will break the record previously held by Jackson Chourio, who got $82 million guaranteed from the Brewers before playing a day in the big leagues. And it's going to include a 9th-year club option, a full no-trade clause, and escalators that could bring it to a value above $130 million. These details and the news first reported by Robert Murray of Fansided. I'm a little surprised just because I thought Colt Emerson was going to debut first and then maybe take the extension, maybe following a path more like Roman Anthony. And Britt, you have wondered if the uncertainty around the new CBA and the expected lockout at season's end was going to push players to be more receptive to take deals. But I think we were expecting that more for guys that had service time, not prospects who were kind of knocking on the door awaiting their first promotion.
That's what makes this interesting. And I think in the case of Cooper Pratt, he's a Scott Boras client. And in talking to a bunch of agents this morning, the player has to really want it if you're at an agency like Boras where they historically tell them to hold off. Now, this is a huge risk for teams. It's less so a risk for players. Obviously, they haven't played yet in the big leagues, but if you are the Milwaukee Brewers, you need to do this. If you're the Seattle Mariners, you feel like, hey, we want to sustain what we have going. If you can lock up these elite prospects, especially shortstops, who can command, $30 million a year on the open market, that's a huge, huge savings. So I personally thought, like you said, we would see more of, and we have a little bit. We saw the Cubs sign some of their guys. You know, I thought we'd see a little bit more of those younger PCA type guys get signed. But I think the problem is these 80, 50 even that we're seeing with Cooper Pratt, these deals, sure over 80 million. If they play in the big leagues and they have a good season, that becomes 120, 130, 140 very quickly, right? Mm-hmm. So I think for teams, it's like, hey, we have a chance here to get a bargain. If this doesn't work out, this is not crippling by any means. If they're just average big league players, it's fine. You have to, especially if you're a smaller market like Milwaukee, kind of give out these lottery tickets. What's so interesting to me, though, guys, is we are just coming out of spring where arbitration happens, and teams will fight tooth and nail to say a guy's worth 1.8 million and not 2 million, right? And essentially, that guy's proven commodity, and we're fighting over $200,000 sometimes. But you are giving these prospects who have not played a single day in the big leagues tens of millions of dollars. It's a much bigger risk. So I just had an agent that was kind of laughing about that. Like, we go to arbitration with guys and you fight tooth and nail over money. We're handing guys who have not played at all in the big leagues an awful lot of money. And that is a huge risk relatively speaking. Again, it's not quite as risky as waiting for that player to get good and then you have to pay them a lot more. But I think this is kind of a really interesting situation. Is it the CBA? I don't think so, because if the CBA is going to have a salary cap, it's not going to affect these guys that are still making, even a record for a guy who hadn't debuted. This is still peanuts in the grand scheme of things over like 6 years, 8 years. It's still not a whole lot of money, in terms of if there is a salary cap. I just think it's a case where they are, probably offering this to they're probably 10 times the amount of players that are being offered these deals. We know the Orioles tried to sign Gunnar Henderson. We saw the Orioles sign Samuel Basallo, who just made his first opening day roster, right? So I think these are getting offered by so many different teams. And we are now seeing more and more guys that are like, you know what? I'm going to take that deal. I'm going to take the guaranteed money. I'm not sure what's going to happen down the road, but these guys are so young, they could theoretically get another crack at free agency. So we are seeing the thinking shift a little bit for players. I think this was always offered by teams, but we are seeing the thinking shift by players who are still in the minor leagues.
Yeah, I'm often fascinated by the thinking on the player side of these deals, especially because Colt Emerson was a first round pick that got $3.8 million to sign. So this isn't a player that's running out of money or just sees the dollar signs and is going for that. This is a player that wants financial security or wants security, you know, does this player want to play in the big leagues quicker? And does he think that if he signs this deal, he gets the big leagues quicker? I don't have any reporting to suggest that that's necessarily the case, but you'd have to think that we've seen it in the past where teams have signed guys to extensions and then they're there on opening day. So I wonder if he thought this would get him to the big leagues quicker, and by doing so, get him to free agency quicker, and so therefore be a good long-term money deal as well, because he gets to free agency before he's 30 if he can start playing before he's 21, and so I think that's part of the calculus here for the teams. I think it's obvious that they think, we sign three of these deals, two of them work out, and they pay for five of these deals in the future. You know what I mean? It's just, one of these deals working out is so much surplus value for the team that they're gonna be willing to fail on the level of Scott Kingery or John Singleton, because it's going to be good for them in the other times, and it's going to pay for a bunch of John Singletons and Scott Kingery. So I was looking at Colt Emerson thinking, who does this remind me of? Well, J.P. Crawford, is not a name that people want to hear right now because they're more excited about Colt Emerson than J.P. Crawford. They think he's going to be a star, and he could be a star. But J.P. Crawford had similar walk and strikeout rates in the minors, maybe slightly better strikeouts, maybe slightly worse power, but some of that where, didn't have the plus speed, and was a highly regarded prospect. He debuted at 22, and Emerson's going to debut, close to 21. So a decent comp. And he was an 18-win shortstop, and that would give if Colt Emerson's an 18-win shortstop for the JP Crawford, like JP Crawford, for the Mariners over the life of this contract, they're paying $5 million a win when the going rate is $11 million. So that's why they do this, because the median outcome for Colt Emerson, as unexciting as that might seem to someone who thinks that Colt Emerson can be a star, still makes it worth it. And if he is that star, then it's just an amazing contract.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the key here is it's a more likely path to surplus value than it is to complete failure. And I think people obsess over an 8-figure deal and say, oh, if it doesn't work out, it's going to be awful. It's really not. I mean, in the case of Emerson, it's about $11-12 million a year guaranteed. You don't have to be a great player to return that type of major league value. And I think what people lose sight of, and I think it's the bellwether issue for me in CBA negotiations, if I had any sort of say from the Players Association perspective, is you have to shorten the path to free agency. You're providing an incredible amount of value in the 6 major league years of control that teams have over your career. And I think a good example of that is we're 2 years into the career of Jackson Chourio, right? 82 million guaranteed just a couple winters ago. Huge deal when he signed it. People said, "Oh, it's risky." All the same stuff, all the same reaction. How much value has Jackson Chourio already generated in his first 2 big league seasons? $54.8 million. He's earned more than half of the total value of the 8-year deal in its first 2 years, which arguably could be the worst 2 years that he plays from a true talent perspective because he's so young, right? And then for players that you don't give these extensions to, you're getting league minimum salaries for the first couple, often the first 3 years, and then you're ticking up through 3 years of arbitration. Arbitration years are still underpaid years relative to your free agent market value, right? It just slowly decreases compared to what the open market would actually pay you. So every time we have a bad free agent deal come along, it comes up anytime fans are worried about money. The Anthony Rendon deal was horrible. Yeah, look at the deal they got on Mike Trout, like originally, right? Like all of those things are there. And it's not even superstar players. The guy that I kept thinking about when I was looking at Colt Emerson and Cooper Pratt was Nico Hoerner. Because Nico Hoerner is a guy that hasn't shown in-game power, but plays great defense, great base runner, good hit tool, controls the zone well. And if you're taking either one of these guys with varying likelihoods of developing power, Emerson to me more likely to develop a 20-plus power profile than Pratt. But Pratt's so young and controls the zone so well, it's not impossible that he would do it. You have to tell yourself the baseline value is good strike zone judgment, great defender at a premium position. That's like a 2.5 win sort of player. We are happy to pay that for that player over these years, right? That's just, to me, like how all of the pieces fit together. So I'm not surprised the teams would do it. I guess I'm a little more surprised in the case of Colt Emerson because I see more ceiling there. With Cooper Pratt, you say, okay, this is a guy that only slugged .348 at AA last year. And the important context is he was only 20 years old. But to me, that's a little more of the, all right, he's taking the guaranteed money right now because year to year, there's no guarantee that the league minimum plus those arbitration years actually pays him a lot more than that deal that he just got guaranteed before playing his first big league game.
Well, yeah. I also think, too, that if some guys don't want the pressure of like, now there's no pressure on them of living up to expectations. Now you have time to struggle in the big leagues for a little while. Now you have such a long time before you have to worry about free agency. And these guys are young enough that if they're the players you think they're going to be, they are going to get a crack at free agency. So I think that for some players, not having to worry about this anymore, not having to go to arbitration with teams and fight it out, like we just saw the contentious hearing with the Tigers and Skubal, right? Like where they were so far apart. You don't have to deal with any of that. You have no more questions anymore. And for a lot of guys, that's a huge relief. They can just go out and play. So I don't think enough people realize that either. And also, there is the risk that they don't pan out. And as you said, Derek, it's not a lot of money. I don't think people realize how much money big league teams waste. Like these signing bonuses that they give to guys that never make it to the big leagues, couple million over at least a bunch of different players. I mean, we are in a situation now where teams are giving like 8, 9, 10-year-olds signing bonuses and verbal agreements when it comes to international signings, right? It's the Wild Wild West. So if a team is going to end up wasting that money, it's really just a drop in the bucket. It's a hard thing for them to not come out on top with these deals. Like, as you guys said, especially when you're targeting guys who are touted, who you expect to be part of the big league team sooner rather than later. I just think for a lot of players, like to have that money and to know that your family is secure and all you really have to do now is play baseball, that for a lot of guys, that is incredibly appealing.
Yeah, there's some important context also for Cooper Pratt, which is that it's a smaller deal. You know, the Brewers gave Cooper Pratt $50 million. And, and the worst case scenario probably is lower because, I don't think that he's as highly regarded as a prospect in terms of lists, and we haven't seen that demonstrated power. I do want to point out that it was a pitcher's league, so once you account for that, he was above average. He had an above average WRC plus. We've learned in the past that if you're that young, you actually want to add some numbers to that WRC plus to account for the fact that he's so young. I think it was something like as much as 20 points per year that you are younger than average. So his 107 WRC plus at AA last year it's better than that. And, I took a look at some comps because I thought, hey, why don't we look at everybody that was 20 or younger at AA over the last 20 years and look at guys who were not like, because if you look at that list, Mike Trout's on it, and he had like a 140 WRC plus, right? Like he was a really good prospect. And I wanted to look instead at guys who were above league average, but not great. So I limited it to 10% above league average. And I just looked at guys who had similar walk and strikeout rates and WRC plus. And here are the Cooper Pratt comps over the last 25 years. Sebastian Walcott, who, he might be a top 10 prospect. He's hurt right now. Francisco Lindor, Edgar Carrero, the catcher for the White Sox, Cooper Pratt, Jefferson Cuero, so the other prospect in the Brewers organization, and then Matt Dominguez, who was with the Marlins. So I think what we have here is you do have a bust rate. You still have players like Matt Dominguez that didn't quite make it as major leaguers. Matt Dominguez, though, did put up some value. And so if he's the worst case scenario on this list, I guess he was actually negative for his career. So that would be a bad situation. But also, Cooper Pratt plays better defense than Matt Dominguez. I mean, Matt Dominguez was a third baseman. So I think the worst case scenario for Cooper Pratt is he's like a fifth infielder, and he's a half win to a win guy. And yes, for the Brewers, that would be bad because at some point that means that they're paying $10 million for a bench piece. So that would be why in the Discord right now, someone has planted their flag saying that this is a bad deal and that Cooper Pratt hasn't shown that power and that this one might not work out and it might actually hurt the Brewers.
I am going to echo something Britt said, and even for a team like the Brewers that runs a very small payroll, I do not think $50.75 million over 8 years for Cooper Pratt hurts them, even if they're loud wrong about it. I just don't think it's going to matter in the grand scheme of things. I think you're talking about a current major league shortstop defensively already. And both of these guys, both Pratt and Emerson, are staying at AAA for now. So the extensions did not lead to immediate promotions, but I do think it changes our expectations for the timetable in both cases. And one last thought before we move on to our next topic. I do think Colt Emerson as a hitter reminds me a little bit more of a Jackson Merrill. So if you're saying, like, who are the comps for both these guys? I mentioned Nico Horner earlier. Horner, but at shortstop, is sort of my Cooper Pratt, like, short-term expectation. Colt Emerson and Jackson Merrill, to me, look really similar as prospects. And I know Merrill had to move out to center field because of the way that roster was built, but that's the type of hitter that I think Colt Emerson can become. But the good news is we get to see how it plays out, and we get to argue about it and debate it for the next decade almost for both of these guys.
Yeah, if we're around that long, we will. I also think, too,
that's true.
Little media joke for those of you who are wondering what we're talking about. I also think that these are top prospects, right? So even if they fail with their current teams are always enamored by top prospects, other teams. They think they can fix these guys. Guys who are drafted high. Yeah, guys who are drafted high always gets, and this irks guys who are not drafted high, but they always get extra chances. They always get the benefit of the doubt. There's always that, like, I can fix this guy. So again, if the Brewers are like, it's the end of the road with this guy, we're only 3-4 years in, maybe they don't recoup all their money, but they could easily deal him and make up like half of that deal, I think. That's just how it works.
That's a good point. I mean, you can't get rid of 300 million, but sometimes you can get rid of 5 or 10 million.
Not really a concern either one of these cases long term. And hey, if that's what the players wanted, good for them. I'm glad they got deals that make them happy. We are going to hit a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at Roki Sasaki's highly anticipated 2026 debut. Keep it right here. Welcome back to Rates and Barrels. We are putting a few of Monday's outings under the microscope, the first of which is Roki Sasaki. A favorable matchup, to say the least. He was at home against the Guardians. I know Chase the Lauder has hit the ground running in his first 5 games of this season, but when you are looking for teams to pick on right now with your pitchers, Cleveland's actually pretty high on that list in terms of lineups that I do not fear. So I was looking for some positives. Ultimately, Roki topped out at 99.5 with the fastball. The velo really hasn't been the problem. 9 swinging strikes in 4 innings, right? He struck out Steven Kwan to start the game. It was a 7 pitch at bat. Got Jose Ramirez on 3 pitches to strike out in his second at bat. And yet, it still felt like more of the same in a lot of ways, a lot of inconsistency with the command from Roki. It wasn't the kind of start where you say he's a liability if he does this on a regular basis, but it also wasn't what we were promised. And I think there's something to be gleaned here, like when we're talking about Roki Sasaki, we're not giving him the typical benefit of time that most young players seem to get, right? We were just talking about with those long-term deals for Colt Emerson and Cooper Pratt. Like, it's going to take a little time for those guys to find their footing in the big leagues and be productive hitters, especially Pratt. But with Roki, I think our expectations out of the box were that he'd be an impact starter on the league's best team, and it hasn't happened yet. So what did you see on Monday night, and where do you think we're actually going from here on a Dodgers team where everything Roki does is going to be under the microscope?
Yeah, but this is the first time that I watched him pitch that I thought maybe it could work as a starter.
First time, okay.
This is the first time. And so I do think that there's now a package. The new cutter that he's got is actually a gyro slider, meaning that it's a bullet slider. It has 0-0 movement. There's no real great way to explain what that means, except that it's how a bullet flies through space. It has spin that does not impart movement. That's called gyro spin. And so it's a bullet slider that he throws 89 miles an hour. And the best thing is it's a decent pitch for action. I mean, it's an 89-mile-an-hour slider, and it's also a decent pitch for him to command. It's the only pitch that he can really put in the zone when he wants to. And so there is a pathway forward for him, which is, not that different from Jacob Mizorowski, where he's going to throw a hard slider for strikes, and then he's going to spray that four-seamer when he gets 2 strikes, and he's going to spray the forkball. And he can't really command either of the two, so I think he's always going to be a high walk rate guy. But if he can go to that slider and it doesn't get really hit super, super hard when he goes to it in 2-0 counts and stuff, then I think there is a pathway forward. I'm not sure that it's like a Cy Young guy, but it does look like it did look better. Just the cutter itself is not that interesting on movement. I'd looked at comps. It's basically like Quinn Priester's cutter. But just like with Quinn Priester, as soon as he started throwing that cutter, it did things for his arsenal. And that's what I saw with Roki Sasaki, is that this new cutter did something. But I the next step for me is actually between the ears. I think that he needs to chill out. There needs to find some sort of, some space where he's competitive. I don't know. There's something there on top of it, but just success breeds confidence. So if you can have a little bit more success, I think he can get there.
I had one quick follow-up before I throw it to you, Britt. I'm thinking about this in terms of maybe some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that goes on that maybe we're not always privy to. It seems like the politics of keeping Roki in the rotation go a little bit beyond what we see with our eyes on the mound, and that might be an understatement. But do you think if they continue down this path, do you think there's a simple world where Shohei Ohtani or his other teammates can impart on Roki that he doesn't have to be the ace of this staff? All he needs to be right now is a number 4 or number 5 starter with plenty of time to eventually get better, right? If he just takes the ball every 5th or 6th day and gives them 4 or 5 good innings and doesn't create liabilities for the bullpen, I think that'll work on a team that's as good as this team is. Is that an unrealistic thing to expect them to be able to do as an organization? Because it seems like a pretty small ask.
Yeah, I think it's just hard because this is a guy who starred in the WBC, who was, he was lights out, and he was every bit the star that Shohei was the year that they won it all in the WBC. And so I think it's a little bit hard for him to go from star in the WBC, winning it all, up there with Shohei, to number one prospect that everybody wanted. Everybody's meeting with him, and then, now he's all the way down at the bottom. So yeah, maybe that's a good middle place to find, but I think that is part of the story too, is just the ups and downs that he's had so far in his career.
Have you guys ever closely covered like a Japanese or any like international player like day to day?
I have
It
not.
is, it is, have you? No, right?
I've
Um,
seen a lot of show. I've never actually got to talk to him, and I didn't. Yeah, it wasn't every day.
right, right,
Yeah,
not on the beat or anything. Like, so
yeah,
it is, having been on the beat and been close to those guys. I didn't cover Shohei Ohtani on a beat, but plenty of other international players. It is a different animal than it is for American players and American stars. Now, Sasaki is on a Dodgers team that is heavily, heavily staffed Japanese reporters. Everything Ohtani does, everything Roki does is front page news back home. And this is true for pretty much every international player, every Japanese player, every player
yeah. I
from
was thinking about. I
Taiwan.
get Jung Hoo Lee. I see him
Yes,
daily, and it's Jung Hoo Lee
every,
is like for Americans. You're like Jung Hoo Lee, like no big deal, and you're like, yeah, well, he's got four guys, four people like by his locker every night, with the TV.
yes. Yes, and when I covered Koji Uehara on a day-to-day basis, and when I covered Wei Yin Chen, every day the reporters would ask you about them, even when they weren't pitching. They'd ask the manager about them. They have to produce stories. So the level of pressure on guys like that is so much harder to understand because it is not the same as, a Bryce Harper or, just it's just not the same as like an American
Or
star.
just
It's
like a
just not the same.
struggling young pitcher, because
Correct.
it's almost
Um,
closer to being like Bryce Harper, like
Yes, yes. These
like they're
people
gonna
are
ask him.
celebrities. They are rock
Yeah,
stars. The number one sport in Japan is baseball, right? They're almost like NFL quarterbacks, right? Because it is such a rabid like fan base there. So I think that a lot of that pressure is, a lot of it is certainly mental with him. And Dave Roberts said this. He said this spring that Sasaki was putting too much pressure on his mechanic. He was spending too much time worrying about his mechanics and everything that went along with it. And I think once you start to slide, it can be really hard to get out of that. And the culture is not that Otani's going to throw an arm around him and be like, "You're good, man. Like, we don't need you to be the number one, two, or three." That's not going to happen. For people
mm.
listening, that's just not going to happen. That's just not how it is handled. He's going to have to figure this out himself. The Dodgers are
And
going to
that might be
support him
Shohei versus others, because like you, Darvish is a little bit more of a like sort of
a
arm
little bit more,
around like
yes.
coach.
But I think
Yeah,
Shohei is a little bit more keep to himself. And also Shohei, if you ever go to a game or your clubhouse that Shohei's in, he's never in it. His like
yeah,
every minute is planned out.
yeah.
Every single minute for him is planned out. So,
He's not
he's not
hanging
just
out,
sitting there
dude.
hanging out scrolling on his phone. That's just not what he's
Mm,
doing. He's not sitting on the couch yucking it up watching MLB Network. Like, so,
no.
that I think is something people don't realize as well. I think it was encouraging that he went 4 innings. 4 innings against a Guardians team that, as you guys said, is not very good, expanded the zone many times. 4 innings does not a big league starter make, right? Like especially
Yeah.
for the Dodgers. You're going to have to do better or they're going to have to find a way out of this mess a little bit. But I do think it was an encouraging step forward because his stuff looked better. His fastball was up like a tick and a half versus what we had seen. He had a horrendous spring. So for him to go out there and, have that 4 innings before they took him out, he was probably on a pretty short leash. I think the whole goal was let's make him feel good about himself. And I know some of the pushback has been the Dodgers are treating him like kid gloves, but there's not a whole lot of other alternative here. It is also a big cultural thing. It is a huge insulting thing to send a Japanese player down to the minor leagues, which people don't
Mm.
realize either. I don't know with his contract if they're even eligible, if he's eligible to, if he'd have to give permission to. I don't know how that works with his contract to either of you because there is sometimes a provision in there where they have to agree to go to the minor leagues. But I
I
know
think
it
he
is
just signed as
also
a international free agent.
right. But can he get sent down to the minor leagues or does he have to give his
I think
permission?
so. I think so.
But most of the time with those bigger names, there are provisions that they have to agree.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's not quite as simple as so again, it's a case where you watch this and you wonder, but there's always like 100 other things going on in the background that you just don't realize. And this could be one of them. The other thing is that they need to get him right because they paid him all this money and sending him to AAA may mess with his mind more. So there's like a lot of different things at play here. And I think if he goes 4 innings and he builds on that and then he pitches 5 or 6 in his next outing, then you're kind of on the right track here. If he goes from four to another disaster, then you got real problems if you're the Dodgers. But I thought that was a really good slot for him. to go against Cleveland. I thought his stuff looked better. I thought he looked a little more confident. And it's going to be a case that I think you're going to monitor. And the Dodgers obviously feel like, they can keep him in this rotation and still win games. Now, once that starts to not be something, then they're going to have to make some moves. But there's a lot more at play, I think, when there is a international starting pitcher with this kind of money, with this kind of notoriety, with the sweepstakes that took place before he signed. It's a big deal. Now, if Ohtani was struggling, would people want to send him to AAA? Like, it is a lot different than just your run-of-the-mill guy who is not doing well. And these are stars, right? I didn't see anybody saying, oh, we should send Bryce Harper down if he struggles for a month. That's not happening, right? Like they have to figure it out up here to a certain extent. Maybe Sasaki ends up in the bullpen long term. We saw how good he was in the bullpen. But I just do not think that the best option, you just cannot treat him like a regular player, you cannot treat him like a rookie second year kind of player that is struggling right now. It is just totally different the way that they treat him. Whether it's right or wrong, that's kind of how it works.
Yeah, that just seems like it could become a problem if that new cutter isn't unlocking everything the way it may have been for those 4 innings last night. And it wasn't, top shelf stuff, but it was good enough, which will be fine for the time being. Justin Robleski came out of the pen, chewed up 4 innings. If they're on the same throw day and they're basically tandem starting in these next couple of weeks, the Dodgers have an off day this Thursday, next Thursday, and 2 Thursdays from now. And then they hit a stretch in the back half of April where they don't have as many off days built into the schedule. That'll compound this a little bit. So I think you have most of the first month to kind of let them work through it, where you have a little more room on the roster before it becomes a bigger challenge on your staff as a whole. I do want to give Parker Messick some flowers. Did you guys see him out there in the 6th inning getting back-to-back Ks on Ohtani and Kyle Tucker? Like Parker Messick's just one of those guys, doesn't get a ton of prospect love, doesn't have top shelf stuff, but certainly seems to have the right, I don't know if it's mentality, sequencing, some combination of those things, just finds a way to make it work. And I thought that was a really impressive sequence for him as he closed out that outing.
I mean, he's like if Joey Cantillo had command. I don't know. It's really good secondaries, and just good enough fastballs to make it work. And the difference is that he's got excellent command. I mean, that's something that comes all the way through the prospect grades. For him, had a 60 future command, and I think that's bearing out right now. So, if you're looking for guys that overperform their stuff numbers, it's almost always guys with command. That could be something that you look for when you're doing fantasy or you're thinking about your own team, is somebody that has that sort of, 98 to 100 stuff plus, but, great locations or great scouting grades for their command, because those players seem to outperform their expectations a lot.
The other late night game that had my attention, actually 2 of them did. Yankees-Mariners was great. I mean, Luis Castillo looked really good. His command was probably as good as it's been at any point going back through last season. Sinker was working really well. Saw the debut with the Yankees for Ryan Weathers. I think that was interesting because he threw a lot more sinkers. But the other game that I was focused on for the wrong reason was Tigers D-backs. I wanted to see Justin Verlander's return to the Tigers. I know there were some folks in the Discord that noticed that the Chase Field roof was open before the start, so they bailed quickly on Verlander in their lineups in daily leagues, or even in weekly leagues too, I guess, if that hadn't locked yet. So kudos to them because the start didn't go that well. I wanted to get your guys' insight on this. I mean, we saw Verlander pitch pretty well in the second half of last season in particular. A little bit of a velo dip on the four-seamer, down from 93.9 to 93.2. I mean, not a ridiculous loss of velocity. Still got some whiffs on the slider, but did give up that homer to Corbin Carroll on a slider that was in the bottom of the strike zone. Are we looking at Verlander and saying his first start of the year was within the range of this iteration of Verlander, or did you see a drop-off from him, that makes you more concerned about what these next few turns look like? His next turn comes at home on Sunday Night Baseball against the Cardinals.
Well, a couple things that I didn't like in the numbers were just that this is the worst fastball velocity he's had in, 12 years, so it was down. It's the worst stuff plus he's had, and on top of that, he was struggling to locate. So I wonder if it's just like hard for him to throw this hard, so he's going to lose command if that's the way that it's going to go out, because you can actually see a gradual drop in his command over the last few years. That is concerning. Then lastly, I'm just sort of surprised that, somebody who has taken to coaching really well in the past. I mean, this is somebody who came from Detroit to Houston and literally just, what do you want me to do? Like, what would you have me do? And had a real great late career resurgence with Houston, that was due to taking coaching. I'm just surprised that he's still throwing 43% fastballs when it's this 93 mile an hour, low stuff plus fastball. Like, why isn't he throwing a cutter and a sinker? Why isn't he throwing every pitch he can? Why is it still 43% fastballs? I think that's what's going to get him into trouble in the end, is he's holding on to this fastball that's not the same fastball it ever was. And I know he's got the slider up to 30%, but there's got to be something else in there, like I'd be throwing every wrinkle I had against the wall right now if I was his age trying to compete.
Yeah, he did look 43 years old for sure last night, it felt like. But I think I agree with everything you said. I also think like the way Arizona hit him too, like they ferociously really was the word that kind of came to mind when I thought about that outing. Like I think they had 9 balls that were hit 95 miles an hour or harder, so 9 like really hard hit balls off of him. So it wasn't like sometimes we see these outings and the stuff's not great, but balls fall in or whatever, right? This was not one of those. Like he was hit hard. An Arizona team that was just swept by the Dodgers, hit him hard. And that's concerning. Now, you're right. I do think Detroit has gotten a fair amount of praise because they have done pretty well with their pitching factory and they've been able to take guys that, haven't been pitching well, fix them, so to speak. Jack Flaherty is a guy who comes to mind who really kind of turned things around when he came to Detroit. You wonder, is it not enough time? Is it a case where after an outing like that, they go back to the drawing board and they make some real adjustments? Because Verlander said it, and it's true. Like, this is not sustainable the way he pitched. They can't keep him in the rotation if he pitches like this. How many starts can you absorb like this, even from a guy who's going to be in the Hall of Fame someday? 3, right? Like you need to figure out a way to make it work. So that is concerning. I was more concerned about that outing than I was about Roki Sasaki, to be frank, because of the way they hit him, the way his stuff looked, his age, the fact that like they now not pull a rabbit out of the hat, but they now kind of have to completely pivot whatever they were doing and fix this because nothing was good. The
Yeah.
game plan wasn't good. The stuff wasn't good. Like nothing really can you take out of that outing other than just completely scrubbing it and forgetting it.
Yeah, and I think they put Troy Melton on like the 60-day IL. So they're slow walking their best prospect that could come up and help them. So they're kind of with Reese Olson's injury and Troy Melton's injury, they're kind of painted into a little bit of a corner here. Yeah, they could always do Cater Montero, bring him up, and maybe piggyback with Justin Verlander. Is that you're going to go to Justin Verlander and be like, we just want 3 innings out of you every time.
Oh,
Throw as hard as you can. Do you think Justin's going to love that?
let's be a fly on the wall for that conversation.
Yeah, but also, I mean, maybe Justin's a little bit more available for coaching now than he was before that start. Maybe there is a chance to say, hey, maybe the cutter and sinker aren't great, but you've thrown them before. Why don't you just try some where you just pepper those in and see what it does? Take some, or what if you threw 20% curveballs so that you're really reducing the fastball down to 30% and 20%? What if you push the slider to 40%? Like let's
Right.
play around with the mix, because we're not gonna pull a rabbit out of a hat and find 2 ticks of missing velo. That's you're past the age for that. So I think that there's a possibility that they can coach him into this. But I do think that it is a little bit of the issue when you are signing these older guys. Like, I talk to older guys, and I don't want to name names because apparently sometimes baseball cares about this, but I talked to an older guy who was not a future Hall of Famer. And near the end of his career, the team came to him and said, hey, you can go on the IL or we can release you. And he was like, oh, I'll take the IL. And that was like a way for them to like coach the player, and maybe there'd be another injury, you come back on the field, maybe you figure something out and we bring you back out. That's like the only way forward with a future Hall of Famer, and even that is
Yes.
fraught with concern, because you're like, I need to now walk up to Justin Verlander and say, hey, so
How's your
Would you like to
hamstring?
go on the IL? Yeah.
Tough.
So it's a little bit easier sometimes when you sign. There's all sorts of names. I mean, like Chris Bassett or any of these guys.
Right.
It's a little bit easier to figure out. Oh, we're going to shift you to the bullpen for a little bit, and they're going to be like, "Yeah, man, okay." Like they probably don't have that same gravitas as like, well, Justin Verlander's a future Hall of Famer, and so you kind of have to be careful about how you approach him with these things, and that's why maybe he hasn't even been approached with. I've talked to pitching coaches that have coached him and said, I don't, I have some ideas, but I haven't brought them to him yet because I'm waiting for the right moment.
Yeah,
And
probably want to
I'm not
approach
picking
that
on
with
him.
care.
I'm just saying,
No, no.
Right, right, right.
sometimes
No,
your
no, no. Max
gravitas,
Scherzer's the
sometimes
same
it goes
way.
past,
Yeah.
but it goes past you. Like you don't even know it. You're Max and you're just hanging out. But like the guy's like, oh, I don't know. Can I talk to Max about what I think Max
Yeah.
Scherzer about like what he should do? Yeah. So maybe now there's an opportunity to tweak something going forward. But yeah, it wasn't a great start and it didn't really give me much hope for the future.
Another case for the anti-model and the non-Hall of Famers, right? The more coachable guys, right? You get the studs at the beginning of the career like Roki, hard to deal with it. You get the future Hall of Famers at the end of the career,
the very
all
end,
sorts of
yeah.
problems. But the guys right in the middle, the Lodem guys, much easier to manage. Other takeaway for me from that start, though, Michael Soroka was great in his Diamondbacks debut, had an immaculate inning in the fifth, 10 Ks in that outing. His command was excellent. Added a little more of the cutter as well. So making some adjustments and really curious to see where it goes for him. It's a guy that has had multiple Achilles injuries. I mean, that's just a huge thing to come back from it all. It'd be great to see him out there for a full, healthy big league season, working the way we thought he could as a prospect.
What does he do? He has a really good breaking ball, and he doesn't have the greatest fastball. So what does he do? He's now throwing 3 fastballs. I mean, that's the sort of tweak I'm asking for from Verlander to some extent. And so, this could really be a year where Soroka pops because he's always had pretty good command. And he's always had this good, or at least in recent iterations, he's had this really good breaking ball. So just sort of fitting the constellation around it. Think about like somebody like Kyle Bradish, like not a great fastball, but he has that amazing breaking ball and he's figured out what pitches he can kind of put around it. So I wasn't that big of a fan on Soroka going in, but there's something there. Even something just like adding a 10% cutter, I think could be a really big deal because it takes pressure off that fastball.
Yeah, that next turnout will definitely be under the microscope since that'll come probably before the fab run happens in a lot of fantasy baseball leagues. We are going to hit a quick break. When we come back, Andrew Baggarly joins us for our belated 2026 Giants preview. Now it is our pleasure to be joined by Andrew Baggarly, our senior Giants writer at The Athletic. It's time for our Giants preview. Even though it's a few days into the season, we didn't get to this one before opening day. But hey, the Giants have been very interesting in these first 4 games. Andrew, how's it going for you so far this season?
Yeah, going well, going well. Let's preview them after they've actually won one and not when they're 0-3. That way we can moderate our various temperatures here because I think the view of the team got very different among the fans after the first 3 games.
Yeah, they turned quick on Tony Vitello, and it was a good spring that didn't matter after about one actual game that counted. But that whole series against the Yankees did not go well, and as a follower of the Brewers, I experienced that this time last year. So, sometimes things just don't go well in the first series. What have your impressions been of Tony Vitello overall, though? How he ran spring training, the changes you've seen on the field over the beginning of his tenure?
The one thing I think about anyone in baseball, and it's 162 games plus, a month and a half of spring training. I mean, having sort of just being who people expect you to be is kind of important. Part of being like a good teammate is just having continuity with like, you don't do stuff from a day-to-day, minute-to-minute basis that people aren't expecting. That's why I think like people struggle with Barry Bonds as a teammate because he ran so hot and cold. It could be great one day and not great the next. And the manager is like supposed to be the ultimate metronome kind of person. And I don't think we're going to get that with Tony. I think he's the same person every day, but you never quite know what he's going to say. You never quite know how he's going to react to something. And that's, I think, taken some getting used to. Not that it's been like untenable or it's been uncomfortable. It's just been different. In terms of how he ran the team, in terms of like just the overall, I guess, arc of spring training. I mean, ultimately, it felt like a major league team getting ready for a major league season. It didn't feel that weird. Between the lines, he hasn't, done things that are crazy or unexpected. You look in that dugout during the game, and it seems like they're comporting themselves like a major league team. The things the little wobbles, the things that are going to take some time to get used to, I think are kind of cosmetic at this point. And I'm sure those will be smoothed out as he kind of gets into the rhythm of a major league season. But I mean, it's been kind of fun, to be honest. It's beaten the kind of doldrums of spring training to check in with Tony every day and just see what he's going to make a crazy reference to. And so it's been interesting.
Is it fair to talk about managers in terms of how player friendly they are, if there's a spectrum, and where Tony might be on that? He talked a lot about, getting to know his guys and going to the Dominican, and then even most recently he made a comment about, his speech and how the players were reacting to it, and what he needed to do. I just think about this also in the context of Luis Arraez playing second base defensively to sort of make it a bit of a transition there, is where, do you think he will take Luis Arraez off second base early in the season or late in the season? And how do you think that reflects on how he is when it comes to being a player's manager or not?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There are going to be decisions a manager has to make that are going to be unpopular. They're going to be unpopular with some of your core players that you have to get to buy in and believe in you every day. And I think with the Arraez situation, I mean, he has made it very clear, the front office has made it very clear, the reason he's a Giant and he didn't go back to San Diego, and he says he has had multiple year offers out there, but he wanted to sign with the Giants because the Giants were the only team that gave him a shot at being an everyday second baseman again. And so I don't think, if that's what you promised the guy, you have to obviously make the right moves to help you win, but you also have to give him a little bit of rope because you've made that promise to him. Now, if we get a month in the season and you look at his metrics and he's got, -8, outs above average, and it's very clear that, he's just not laterally getting to enough balls at second base. And by the way, he's pretty good at the double play turn. He's pretty good at going out into shallow right field on pop-ups. It's just the lateral range that we've seen, already kind of manifest itself a little bit here and there. But I think you got to give him a chance to fail a little bit, and then, you can point to that and say, look, Luis, you've got a -8 outs above average. We've got these plays that have gone through. Logan Webb gets more ground balls to the right side than any pitcher in the major leagues. Maybe it starts with taking him out for late inning defense, and Christian Koss is in there, in the eighth inning of a one-run game,
or against Logan Webb when Logan Webb is starting.
For sure. But I think you got to give your deference to a guy like that who's won batting titles and is with you because you made this promise to him. But then you look at the game that the only game in the Yankees series that Tony actually got to make some managerial decisions really was the last game, which they lost 3-1. But he gets Willy Adames on as the tying run at first base in the ninth. And after Harrison Bader strikes out, he puts Jared Oliva out there to pinch run for Willy Adames, who had been pinch run for once in his career, and that was the last game of the 2019 season, and definitely caught him off guard. I mean, Adames has a above average sprint speed, but Jared Oliva stole 14 bases in spring training and is more than 30 feet per second. So that's a move where after you make that move, you're probably going to have to take one of your main core guys and have a conversation with him and explain why you made that move. And the fact he wasn't afraid to do that, I thought was a really good sign of someone who is going to manage, with some conviction and not necessarily be afraid of what major league players are going to think about him or how he's going to react or how he's going to manage a situation where someone, may not understand a move or be unhappy. So, yeah, it's interesting. And I think to your point about being on a spectrum between being a player's manager or, a country club manager or whatever you want to call it, I just think in terms of temperament, it's a much different temperament and it's going to be much more high energy and just feeling like when things are going bad, you're not going to let it happen to you. And that's the sense that, sort of permeated the group last season. I'm not sure that there was a whole lot Bob Melvin could have done differently, but they wanted someone who would have a little more fire. And sometimes you oversteer. I mean, that happens all the time, and you end up fishtailing in the ditch on the other side of the road. But so we'll see how it goes. But it's going to be something that we can watch and analyze and make too big a deal of, really, sometimes all year long, which is great for us sports writers.
I think the attention on the Giants picked up as soon as they made the blockbuster trade to get Rafael Devers almost 10 months ago, a little less than that so far. And when you start to look at the Buster Posey era so far, to me, that's sort of like the big thing that started it all. But this team's different, right? So you have Devers, you have Adames and Chapman as cornerstone guys, Elliot Ramos is a high-volume guy, you bring in Arraez, and now you've got Harrison Bader playing center field. So Jung-Hoo Lee doesn't have to play center anymore. You move him to a corner. That seems like a good thing. How much has this team improved over the past 9-10 months, thinking about all the different ways they've reshaped the roster?
Yeah, we talk about, oversteering or moving from one spectrum to another. I mean, in terms of lineup continuity, it's completely different. You look at 2021 and the year they won 107 regular season games, and yeah, you had Brandon Belt, you had Buster Posey's final season, you had Brandon Crawford, but the rest of that team was pretty much guys who mixed and matched. I mean, they got like 49 home runs out of first base, but you don't notice it because when Brandon Belt wasn't playing, that meant that Darren Ruff was playing or Lamont Wade was playing when Belt was hurt, and those guys all produced. You had Mike Yastrzemski, who was a pretty darn good Giant, but he was not allowed to face a lot of left-handed pitching. So we'll see if we get there with Jung-Hoo Lee, where they don't let him face a lot of same-side pitching. They're not there yet, but you could argue that they should get there. And you should argue that Harrison Bader should not face a right-handed reliever in the late innings. But oops, the Giants don't have a lefty bat on the bench at all. So that'll be kind of interesting if you want to pinch hit for Casey Schmidt against a late, really, really tough right-handed reliever. They don't have anybody. And so I think I wrote this a couple of days ago after the Yankee sweep. They're kind of an easy team to manage against right now. And you kind of don't want to be that kind of team. You want to create lots of problems, lots of uncertainty when your opponent's game planning for you. Now, that's doesn't win you the game. The overall talent level is going to win you the game. And if you love all of your everyday players and you never want to pinch hit for any of them, hey, that's great. Congratulations. But, that's usually not the way it works. So, yeah, I think that the biggest change is that there's a lot of lineup continuity where, we didn't have nearly that much before. And there are times when that's going to really help them. And there are times in the late innings when they don't get the matchups they want where it's going to be a disservice to them. And they're going to have to, maybe make some roster tweaks along the way, try to bring in maybe a veteran left-handed presence off the bench or hope that Will Brennan becomes that presence or Drew Gilbert becomes that presence. But yeah, it's definitely a different difference than it was in the past.
To your point, only 9 Giants have stepped to the plate this year. So they don't really. I mean, who is on the bench? Oliva's the kind of this pinch runner style fourth outfielder.
You've got Gerard Encarnacion, who was out of options,
and he's a right-hander. Yeah.
And while Rafael Devers is DHing, there's really no place to play Encarnacion, and everyone loves him and thinks a lot of him. And there are times when he's looked really poised for a breakout and then he's gotten hurt. He's a guy who can crush lefties off the bench. We've seen him do it before. But yeah, it'd be wonderful if he was left-handed. And then you've got I'm blanking here, Christian Koss. Who is kind of a Casey Schmidt analog, but they're not totally redundant. They do some different things. This really is a bench that is going to support this lineup the best by, to your point, late inning defense when we get to that stage and pinch running. It's not going to be a lot of pinch hitting. So that's why Koss, I think, fits. You can play him anywhere on the infield. Schmidt, you can play more at first, at third. Really, what this team needs is Dom Smith. He was so good for them last year. He hit a walk-off grand slam for the Braves a couple days ago, and it's like, oh yeah, that would have been nice to have on the Giants bench against
I hate to
well,
say it,
against
Bryce
Bednar and the
Eldridge
Yankees.
too, right?
Yeah, although I think Eldridge is a little bit of a different animal because he wouldn't be on the bench up here. If he's here, he's playing, and he's at first base and Devers is DHing or vice versa, which
Hmm.
means that you lose the flexibility of the DH and being able to give some guys like a half day off their feet. But if Bryce Eldridge is hitting and he's making authoritative impact, then obviously you're a better team and you're a deeper lineup, and you got one more lefty in the batting order that you can use to make sure you don't have a pocket of right-handed hitters that can be exploited. So I don't know. I think I rambled on that answer a little bit, but hopefully I got to where I needed to go.
Yeah, no, I think you got there. I think the other problem, relative problem, if you bring up Eldridge too, is it really forces the issue more with Arraez playing a lot more second base because one of the spots you can take him off is just throw him in DH. Like that's not as big of a deal to DH him once in a while. DH him on the days that Webb pitches and play him at
Yeah.
second base the other days. You can't really do that if Devers and Eldridge are both there covering those two spots.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
I wanted to ask you what your trust level is in the back three starters. I mean, Landen Roupp looked great in San Diego on Monday night, but I think a lot of skeptics of this team would say Tyler Mahle, Adrian Hauser, Landen Roupp might be the relative weakness of this club. Like, do you see it that way, or do you actually see a collection of starters that, with health, can chew up innings effectively, maybe limit the wear and tear on the bullpen, and use Oracle Park to their benefit the way we've seen a lot of mid-rotation and back-end starters do over the years?
Yeah, I think it's. I don't know if there are a lot of Giants fans who were like doing cartwheels when they signed Tyler Mahle and Adrian Hauser. I mean, they're guys who are good, kind of ballast rotation guys, and they weren't signed to be number twos, right? They weren't even signed really to be number threes. But when you have two of those guys instead of one to be your number five starter, then maybe you start thinking, okay, what's the overall talent level here? I will say that Logan Webb obviously did not have a great start on opening day. Robbie Ray looked really, really good against the Yankees. He gave up, obviously the one homer to Judge, but his slider shape was back to what it was in 2021 when he won the Cy Young Award. That's what Patrick Bailey told me. Said it was the best he's ever seen, Robbie Ray. And he's gotta have the staying power. He didn't have it last year, but it was his first full season since the Tommy John surgery. So I think there's optimism that now that he's worked his way back up in terms of innings, that maybe he can, see the year through a little bit. But if you got them as a 1-2 punch, that's a really good place to start. And then, echoing what your point about Landen Roupp, he looked really, really good. And not only that, I mean, this guy, you can just kind of tell when someone's got that sort of bulldog temperament, that kind of take no prisoners attitude on the mound. He's a tough customer, man. He really is. I think he's wired the right way. I think Trevor McDonald is very similar. And he's looked really good at times in spring training, especially early on. I thought he was pitching so well they'd have to find a way to carry him, even if it's as a reliever. But that they ran out of pitching depth last year, and they thought they had plenty of it, and they didn't. So it's going to be important for the Carson Whisenhunts of the world, to keep kind of sort of showing that their big league readiness. They've got Carson Seymour, who may be on a relief path. They don't have a lot of upper level pitching. Most of the strengths of their system are position players now. So, yeah, I think there is a little bit of concern just because they thought they had more depth last year and they ran out of it. So, it's going to be important for all those guys to stay healthy. Hauser, Mahle, all these guys have dealt with physical things, which is why they were available to the Giants on a short-term contract. So, but you never know. I mean, Ranger Suarez signed a big deal, and he didn't look so good on opening day. It's just one start, so you don't make too much of it, whether it's good or bad. But yeah, I mean, I have never covered a Giants team that was really good that had a big hole in their pitching staff. Every team has been able to pitch and has been able to hold leads. So, and the fact the bullpen, everybody in that bullpen, we talked about the bench and how they've hardly used their bench at all. Well, everybody in that bullpen has already pitched, and I think the only runs they've allowed in 16 or 18 innings over 4 games was a homer that Buteau allowed to Giancarlo Stanton, who's the strongest guy in the big leagues, and a homer that Barucki, the lefty he gave up to Judge, who's maybe the second strongest guy in the big leagues. So that's a pretty good start, and it's been good that everybody's gotten their feet wet. And it's going to be really important that this bullpen kind of establishes a pecking order. And because a Giants team that can't hold leads is not a fun team to watch.
Yeah, I think that bullpen has come into focus a little bit with Keaton Winn setting up their win. Eric Miller just being basically a stud back there from the left side. I guess I have some depth questions for the roster, which would be one is, who do you think will slot in before Keaton Winn among the different options? Caleb Killian is throwing really hard. Bro Rookie's there as maybe a situational lefty, whereas Miller is more like a setup lefty. He liked Matt Gage. He went to him pretty early. So who's going there? And then who do you think is the next starter up? Who is the sixth starter? I did want to point out Landen Rupp's velo was up and the cutter was a slightly different shape. So I think he's legit, and I agree with you. He's got a good mound mentality. But if Hauser doesn't work out or Mahle has various injuries, who do you think is the next man up in the starting rotation?
I would expect it's probably McDonald, and then Whisenhunt has a chance to come quickly if he can really demonstrate some things. Haven't mentioned Hayden Birdsong. He obviously is out for the year with Tommy John surgery, but
what about Tidwell?
And Tidwell is a guy who I think you can really see a lot of like Rob Nen in him. He's just got that wipeout slider, just this big, like hulking, like he just looks like one giant muscle on the mound. And he's just a big dude, and yeah, it almost looks like
command, huh?
He almost looks like he's gonna sling a rock at you on the mound.
Wow.
Me throw a ball hard, but he's actually a really really smart guy and a really kind of a funny guy. And obviously Tony Vitello knows him very well because he coached him at Tennessee. So I think he plays up as a reliever, but they think there's enough to dream on as a starter that I think they're going to keep him developing along that path. He just needs to fill up the zone more. He just wasn't in the zone enough. Started off really, really good in spring training, and then then kind of tailed off. And that's one thing. If I learned anything from covering those Farhan, Cade Kapler teams, it's strikeout to walk ratio. You got to be on the plus side. You got to really fill up the zone, and you can't afford to have people out there who are just going to issue a lot of walks or 4 walks per 9 plus. And I don't know if Tidwell's comfortably in that spot yet. He's going to have to throw more strikes. So that's going to be important. But there's a lot of these guys that I think showed enough in spring training to make you think that they're going to be a part of things. And there's some tough cuts. Spencer Bivens was a very tough cut. Tristan Beck was a tough cut. These guys have major league experience, and you've got them a phone call away. But in terms of the rotation, I would think McDonald is probably the first guy you'd call.
Anybody on the bullpen side that you see as a true sleeper? I mean, I think a lot of our listeners and viewers have been skeptical of Ryan Walker holding the closer role all season, and probably for good reason. Is it Winn that you see as the favorite to get saves over the course of the year, or is it someone else even behind that?
Yeah, interesting that they didn't name a closer when it was pretty obvious they had one guy who had closing experience, and he was sort of dead set on reestablishing himself in that role. But they did not name Ryan Walker as the closer. They didn't want to, no pun intended, walk it back if he couldn't handle it. So I think there was a kind of a message, sent there without saying who the closer was. But clearly, I think the hope is that he would be the one to grab the job and hold it. And he issued a 4-pitch walk to start his first save situation in San Diego Monday night, and then got 2 outs, and then left a 2-strike pitch where Jackson Merrill could punish it, and boom, it's a 3-2 game. But he got out of it, and he got Xander Bogaerts to ground out, so he got the save. Wasn't the cleanest save, wasn't the kind of save that's going to inspire a super amount of confidence, but did get the job done. So I guess that's the result that matters, and we'll see. I would expect that he'll get the next save situation as well. Keaton Winn, a guy who you hate to call him a failed starter because he just had trouble staying healthy, but he had that split, and there was a time when the Giants were just collecting guys who threw splitters, and Kevin Gossman being the foremost practitioner of the art, and Winn had a really good one, and he was up to 898. 99. Guys like Alex Cobb were watching every one of his bullpen sessions thinking this guy's a stud. And now I think he's officially transitioned to relief, and you can see what that split can do. So yeah, I think people are excited about him. And Matt Gage is a guy who obviously will not wow you with his fastball velocity, but he's got a little more back turn now. He really has more deception in his delivery. And I think his first two outings, he threw slider 16 times out of 22 pitches. It wasn't quite that extreme in his appearance Monday night. But I said, so like, are you basically going to just be one of these one pitch only guys? And he's like, yeah, heck yeah, if it works. So they like him. They think he's someone who has the kind of stuff that can even work against righties too, even though it's not 98 mile an hour fuzz. So those would be the two guys that I might sort of lock in on. And they have three lefties right now, so they can definitely work matchups a little bit.
Yeah, definitely nice to have that depth. Now, we've asked everybody throughout this series for a rating on the Goldilocks porridge scale, too hot, too cold, or just right. On the win total, we've been using PECOTA from Baseball Prospectus for these numbers. Now that we're a few days into the season, we're seeing an 82 on these Giants. So how do you feel about 82 wins for this team?
I mean, they feel like they're like attracted like iron filings to a magnet at 500 the last 4 years. It's like this team just keeps like getting dragged back to 500 no matter what they do. And they're clearly capable of a 20 win month. They're clearly capable of a 20 loss month, but you average it all out and it's like, oh, here we are, 81 and 81. And obviously, you know what? You've got a rookie manager who's never been in pro ball before, and it's a little bit of pressure because your predecessor is a 3-time Manager of the Year award winner, and he got fired for going 81 and 81. So, what does that mean the starting point is for expectations? So as much as you're like, oh, the first year, not a lot of pressure. No, there's a lot of pressure on everybody to figure this out and to get, however many wins it takes to get that third wild card or get a seat at the postseason table. So I think I just have to go with 81 because I've just seen it. I'm conditioned to it now. It's been 4 years. The Giants are a 500 team until they're not. So it'll be up to them to show that they can take a hot streak, and then if they have a cold streak, get out of it faster so they don't, give back a lot of the wins they've banked, because that's been kind of the issue the last few years.
Yeah, it feels like a just right with an asterisk of if Buster is aggressively patching the holes and giving them upgrades mid-season at the trade deadline, then maybe that's enough to get them into the last wild card spot. But if you expect it to be mostly this roster, it's hard to see them going well above that.
Yeah. I guess maybe don't think of it as a bowl of porridge that's not too hot or hot. Think of it like a cup of coffee that's cold, or something like that. It's room temperature. Something that shouldn't be room temperature. That's actually kind of disgusting at room temperature that you don't want at room temperature. That's what the Giants would be.
That's a podcaster's coffee. You just described exactly the type of coffee I get stuck drinking because I bring one down,
sure
start
where
recording,
we're at right now,
take a sip afterwards. I'm like, ooh, this is nothing. This isn't hot. It's not warm. It's not cold. It's just right out in the middle.
Over extracted concierge lounge Marriott coffee.
How many cups of that do you think you've drank on the beat over the years?
Not a whole lot because I take control of this, Derek.
That's right.
I take control of this
situation.
This is a rare instance where I was running late, and so I had to run up and get some coffee. I didn't have time. I have my AeroPress with me. I have my little kettle that's got a silicone body, so it shrinks down. And so I carry that with me everywhere. I carry it with me on vacations. I go to Europe. I don't drink that freeze-dried crap that they give you in your hotel room. So yeah, I don't get the chance.
I love it. I need to get that kit, need to have that at all times because that's how I think about coffee as well. Andrew, we appreciate your time and your insight. Let's let you get out there and brew a nice cup for yourself since the Marriott coffee's not cutting it for you.
I will. Hey, if you want to do like a Julia Child, whatever, let's do the Hour Magazine food segment, and I'll make you a cup of coffee live during the next session. Yeah. We can arrange that. I've got literally it's like 5 feet away from me. I could brew you a nice cup of a nice Kenya peaberry right now if you want.
Oh, that sounds amazing. That's
you can't drink it, but
all-star break. Yeah, brew it for me and drink it for me. Enjoy.
I'm sorry, Derek. That technology has not been invented yet. So.
Maybe next year.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right, that is going to do it for this episode of Rates in Barrels. Thanks to Andrew Baggarly for dropping in for that Giants preview. Thanks as always to Britt for being here on a Tuesday. Join the Discord. If you haven't done so already, you can do that with the link in the show description. Conversation going on there around the clock. Fun to watch games together, especially late in the evening. I find community late in the evening as I'm sitting on my couch and unwinding at the end of the day, usually watching those West Coast games. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Wednesday.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to hit that subscribe or follow button so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed it, drop us a like, leave a rating, or sound off in the comments. We'll see you next time.